Recent outbreak of mayhem characterized by looting and violence once again throwing the spotlight on social cohesion and indeed the rule of law. Businessman and thought leader Dr. Reuel Khoza believes there is this emergence of a strange breed of leaders who are determined to undermine the rule of law, as he wrote at that time. And also, where does our constitution stand at a time like this? Let's speak to Dr. Khoza now, who joins us from Johannesburg. Dr. Khoza, thank you very much for your time. Firstly, let me get your thoughts on the events of the past 2 weeks. And I'm saying 2 weeks, beginning with the arrest of the former president, Jacob Zuma. Your thoughts on what has unfolded in South Africa?
Good afternoon to you, Polly, and good afternoon to your audience. And thank you very much for the platform to express a few thoughts. You start by quoting that which I said in 2011, 2012. One just hopes, prays that people had actually engaged at the time. Perhaps we would not be finding ourselves at this very, very painful conjuncture. But be that as it may I just make a few observations, relating to what our country, what our political economy is currently facing and what it has to grapple with and find solutions to.
Sure.
My sense is that, granting that a hungry nation is an angry nation, accepting too that the searing unemployment and ravaging poverty call for urgent comprehensive solutions. Rioting and looting cannot be justified. If one is in search of a job, it does not help to burn down the factory. If one needs better education, physically assaulting educators and even burning down laboratories and libraries and other buildings will not help. If indeed housing is the goal, only building and construction will produce that end. If fighting hunger, which is what in fact we are facing now, is the objective, burning corn and mealie fields will only worsen the situation. Destroying anything, harming anybody, burning any property cannot bring us closer to the goal we seek. Transformation is a fundamental goal we seek, whether it be gradual or radical, can only be brought about peacefully and constructively, not destructively. So those will be my few observations and, if you like, truisms that I feel I might articulate by way of admonishing my fellow South Africans, my fellow citizens.
Dr. Khoza, I'm going to ask you to be slightly brief, and I totally appreciate why you had to do that short observation at the beginning. We've got lots to get through. Let me ask you whether the wanton destruction of property, the looting we have observed in the past few weeks or past few days, was avoidable in your view?
I believe it was avoidable if only we actually had a leadership that cared to listen and to engage those that may actually have thoughts slightly different from their own. I guess one of the biggest problems that actually occasioned this, perhaps today being a Sunday, one could start with some scripture reference. A house divided. In the Gospel of Mark 3, verse 25, Jesus actually admonishes, and if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. It is now accepted wisdom or knowledge. It's an open secret that the ruling party is divided against itself. And that division at the top cascades to government, i.e. the state. It cascades down to the provinces, to the regions, and to local government. So that needs to be addressed, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
And the way to address that is not to actually mouth platitudes about it. The way to actually address that is to establish what the value system of the ruling party is, what the guiding principles, most of which are actually articulated in our constitution. Rally around that, and anybody who is discordant and at variance with that should actually be brushed aside with gusto. And bold leadership should take the lead and make sure that the rest of the nation actually follows.
Well, you've touched on the issue of leadership. I was going to come towards the end of our conversation, but let's go there anyway. You talk about bold leadership. I want to ask of you of President Cyril Ramaphosa's leadership and the cohort that he leads with at this time. Does he have what it takes?
Perhaps in large measure, but not adequately. One of the submissions I would make is that in leading a complex followership, such as South Africa, this country is diverse, and it's as diverse as it is sophisticated. You cannot rely largely on people who will echo that which you believe in. You actually have to have a diverse counsel to advise you. Even those that actually, at times, fundamentally differ from what it is you say. If you only surround yourself with those who will echo what it is you actually believe in and who won't challenge you when the need arises for you to actually be bolder. Because, I mean, you could have all the attributes. You could have all of the necessary traits. You may even be well prepared educationally to do that. But if you lack courage, and in particular the courage of your own conviction, and perhaps even have the killer instinct. I mean, having a killer instinct doesn't mean that you are going to go murdering anybody, but you must look like you can actually execute something painful. Are you saying
that President Ramaphosa has missed a few of these opportunities where he could have displayed that quote-unquote killer instinct?
That would be my sense as a citizen, but let alone the stuff you mentioned about leadership and stuff like that. I believe it is important for leadership to take a bold stand and let the chips fall where they may. If you allow division and enemies within, you are likely to actually suffer painful consequences. You have to find ways of leading based on principles, based on a value system that you believe in. And anybody who stands on the way should actually experience something that would make them either behave or actually hive off.
In 2011-2012, as you mentioned, you wrote this thought piece, and it was on the back of the release of the financial statements of the Nedbank Group, which you were chairman of at the time, and you got serious backlash on the back of some of the comments you made, in which you said there is an emergence of a strange breed of leadership or leaders in the country at that time. Do you believe that that is still the case today?
Well, it is very much the case. If you look at the division that we referred to and what happened at Nkandla over the past 2 weeks, you know that is in fact there was an ample manifestation of what it is I was talking about in 2011-2012. You have people actually saying we will die for so and so, who has actually flouted the law, who has shown wanton disregard for constitutionality, and who was much earlier on, perhaps at the apex of what we have come to describe as the last 9 or 10 years, who in a very, very serious manner was leading at kleptocracy, i.e. government by focusing on self-enrichment, government by focusing on self-serving schemes and scams. Now you have people who actually say we shall die for a personality of that nature. Now where are we headed to as a nation? Are we going to actually stand firm on the rule of law, which is actually a prerequisite for a successful nation, a prerequisite for bequeathing to posterity that would actually be beneficial? What are we going to do as a nation? Are we going to agitate for the release of somebody who is actually serving a prison sentence because a number of things in terms of the rule of law have been flouted and been trampled upon? Or shall we stand steadfast as a nation and insist that nobody is above the law and that the rule of law should in fact prevail?
But isn't that what has happened, though, Dr. Khoza, which, of course, triggered this unrest that we saw? Wasn't the rule of law upheld when former President Jacob Zuma was sent to jail? Isn't that proof that the rule of law in the country is or stands supreme?
It certainly is, but where are we going from here? Where do we go from here? There are those who would say, no, there shall be mayhem unless you actually release him. What does the state do?
And
what do we do constitutionally? Do we yield, or do we stand firm, or shall we be limp-wristed in addressing that?
Yeah. Well, you come from a community that raises lots of concerns when there is instability, and I'm talking about the business community. In the past week, we've asked lots from the investor community, for example, about what they make of brand South Africa. In your view, as things stand right now, is South Africa at risk of even losing the pledges that have been made in President Ramaphosa's drive to attract $100 billion US?
Well, I believe it is certainly at risk. And we are put at that conjuncture of the risk you refer to because we allowed a number of things to disintegrate. An economy that once grew at the rate of 4 to 6% was brought to stagnation and even regression by the lethal combination of poor leadership. I'm talking about the presidential dispensation just before the current, sheer incompetence in dealing with the demands of socioeconomic complexity, wanton corruption, and hubris at the level of the state. This landed our political economy in junk status. And when we found ourselves there, what did the leaders of the time say? They said, well, if the rent drops, you can actually just pick it up. I mean, that is the level of sophistication, the level of understanding of complexity that we actually found ourselves with at the time. So, yeah, I believe there shall be problems, but I want to believe that if the current government goes a little bolder and in a manner that is a lot more determined, those companies that have made pledges, both national and international, will actually honor their pledges. But we must be seen to be governing ourselves, to be behaving as a citizenry in a manner that says we are a worthy foreign direct investment destination.
Dr. Khoza, let's pause right there. We're going to continue the conversation when we return. How do we build from where we are right now. We're talking to a thought leader, a business leader himself. Just joining us, this is Politics Unscripted. We are in conversation with thought leader and businessman Reuel Khoza, Dr. Reuel Khoza. Dr. Khoza, thanks very much for your time. I just want to conclude on this issue of leadership because I want to get to the rebuilding in particular of the businesses that have been reduced to ashes in the past week. Just on the issue of leadership, next year, December, the ANC, the governing ANC, is going to go to an elective conference. Is there hope, from what you see right now, is there hope that a new leadership, a new breed of leaders, not the ones that you described in 2011, 2012, could come out of that elective conference, or are we going to see much of the same?
Only one is perpetually hopeful. If you lose hope, you die. So I will continue hoping, but quite frankly, a number of things actually have to change. Mm-hmm. First, at the level of the citizenry. We cannot continue to allow people who are ill-prepared to lead to continue leading. Many politicians will actually argue to you and me that they are born leaders. Quite frankly, that is only half true. Are leaders born or made? My submission is that they are born, then made. You're born with the aptitude, but unless you actually take trouble to develop that aptitude to ability, you will actually be floundering. You can step onto the leadership platform, but you are not going to lead because you have not equipped yourself for leadership. You are probably, everybody, for any skill, you need to equip yourself with equipment and tools. Now, political leadership presupposes you having a basket full of concepts that will enable you to think. And a good number of the people who actually step onto the leadership platform have baskets that are near empty. And without those concepts, they cannot actually lead. I think as a citizenry, we have to begin to insist on prescribing who should lead us, as well as proscribing who should not lead us. And in terms of prescription, unless anybody who purpose to lead us in the 21st century has an appreciation of the reality that a political leader is actually leading a political economy, must understand both politics and economics.
Yeah.
Because the two are in lockstep. The two are mutually enhancing or mutually weakening, depending on who is leading. So there is a sense in which whoever wants to lead us in this century has to be prepared that way. They must also appreciate that they'll be dealing with complexity. And unless you are actually prepared by education, by serious reading, to lead, following 2024, please step aside and don't step onto the leadership platform to mislead our beloved country.
Dr. Khoza,
you have to understand.
Dr. Khoza, let me interrupt you there. In the interest of time, I've got two quick questions to squeeze in before we run out. The first one, you are a businessman, which means that intrinsically you know how to build a business from scratch. For those who have lost everything in the past week, what will it take for them to rebuild, or perhaps how long will it take for them to rebuild?
I think the only basis on which they can actually build is if the macro environment is adequately addressed. This country prides itself in having the National Development Plan. And just like its predecessors, as GISA and GEAR, these are very, very elegant plans on paper, long on intent and very short on implementation. So let the leadership actually make sure that the macro environment is conducive for people to actually recover from the devastation. Now, following that, what then happens?
Yeah.
What you need is not a little ameliorative plan that actually says, I'll come and give you 350 rands to live on with your family. You actually have to come up with something tantamount to the Marshall Plan that saved Europe after the war. You actually have to say, I have to stimulate the economy. Stimulating the economy is not merely implementing that which you had in your demure and inconsequential budgeting that you have had historically. You actually have to intervene in a big way.
Yeah.
And where housing is concerned, you got to learn from others who might actually have said, look, let's develop habitat for humankind, but let the people who are going to live in those structures take part, put sweat equity in there. You can't shepherd people like they were little children. Involve and engage them, but make sure that you make the requisite guidance, as in people who understand business, work hand in hand with the emergent business people who are small and medium scale businesses.
Yeah.
At one stage, I actually offered that when I still had some influence. Now at 72, I can only talk. But we brought together a scheme that was going to employ a very, very substantial segment of the graduates that we have. You have municipalities and local governments that don't know what they're doing. And you got this resource on the one hand, and you don't do anything about employing, or if you like, using your own word, deploying this resource that is so extensive, matching it with those that have gone into early retirement. I came up with a plan that actually brought that combination together and get them to go sort out the municipalities that are year after year messing up. The resource is there, but is leadership listening? I submitted this a number of times when I still had that kind of influence. And you get told, yes, we acknowledge receipt of your suggestion. We hear you. That's a modus operandi to brush you aside.
Sure.
They should engage the kinds of business people that actually come up with suggestions like that. And I was speaking on behalf of many major corporations who were happy to pay for the youngsters, to pay for the early retirees to work in tandem, to help assist in making government efficient, in saving the billions that are actually going up in smoke year after year after year, with no consequence, with no real redemption.
Dr. Khoza, unfortunately, because of time, we're going to have to leave it there. I can't squeeze in my last question. Perhaps it'll be left to the next guest that I'll be looking to. Thank you very much, though, for your time. That's Dr. Reuel Khoza, a business leader and indeed someone who has held multiple leadership positions, whether you talk corporate, but also indeed even in the public space.